Alistair Dawber is the Washington correspondent of The Times and The Sunday Times. Welcome to the show, Alistair.
Hi, Ed. How are you doing?
No surprises as to what the big story is in Washington at the moment. Let's have a listen. And the leader, of course, is Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor and former teacher. He's known for calling Donald Trump and his running mate, G. Vance, weird. Let's hear him say it. Which is a pretty effective attack line. And, of course, the Republicans are wondering how to attack Tim Walz, everybody's favourite grandfather. But J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump, is having a go. Oh, well, there you go. That's pretty hardcore from J.D. Vance there. Alistair Dawber, what is the truth in the allegation? Is it rising up the news agenda? Is it being hotly debated?
Well, the Republicans, I've got to be honest, much of the press as well, didn't expect Tim Walz to be Kamala Harris's running mate. And so they've spent the week scrambling around trying to find attack lines. And this is one. I mean, Tim Walz served in the US military for 24 years, but only ever served within the borders of the US. And I think Republicans are now picking over Tim Walz's record. Certainly his unit went to Iraq, but Tim Walz didn't go with them. He'd left the military by that stage. And that contrasts, of course, with J.D. Vance, who did serve as a Marine, as he said there, as he often says, in Iraq in the early 2000s. It's interesting that both vice presidential candidates have got strong military records. Neither Kamala Harris nor, famously, Donald Trump ever wore the uniform. And that's something I think that the Republicans will use in terms of J.D. Vance's military background. And the Democrats too. Tim Walz has been picked because he has this sort of homespun, everyman American appeal. I mean, you described him there as America's grandfather. That's certainly how he's being portrayed at the moment. But he has a military record. He's been a teacher, which sits well with a lot of progressives here in the US, and he's won in Republican areas. He served in Congress, beating an incumbent Republican, and then he served in Minnesota as a governor, where he is now. And that's always a tough one for Democrats to win as well.
There's no news yet on whether Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are going to have their debate. I know that Donald Trump has offered her a debate on Fox News, but there's apparently talk about a possible, Waltz rather has called for a debate with J.D. Vance, a vice president's debate.
That's right. So we had at the start of the year, or a few months ago, an agreement for 3 debates, 2 presidential debates and a vice presidential debate. But then the political landscape here looked very different. It was going to be Joe Biden against Donald Trump. We saw the first debate, and we all saw what happened there. There is tentatively an agreement already in place for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to debate on ABC News. Donald Trump doesn't seem to want to do that anymore and has instead suggested something on Fox. And then possibly as soon as next month, we could get J.D. Vance and Tim Walz going head-to-head. That's something that the Democrats are pushing for very hard. It's something that J.D. Vance has said he'd be happy to do, but it seems that we don't yet quite have an agreement on the date, the venue, or the network it'll be broadcast on.
And it's interesting the issues that kind of come up and give candidates a tough time. Of course, Tim Walz went to teach in China, and he's continued to visit China ever since. But of course, in America, that becomes, in some ways, a red flag. No pun intended.
It does indeed. And Tim Walz, as we said, was a teacher for a long time and spent a year between, I think, 1989 and 1990 teaching in China. That has allowed the Republicans to say that he's got strong links to the Chinese Communist Party. I think China at that point looked a bit different in terms of its relationship with the US. But again, it's something that the Republicans will use to try and suggest that Tim Walz's record on things like national security isn't strong. It's just another attack line. And at the moment, that's where we are. Where the Republicans are testing out these attack lines and seeing which ones stick.
And of course, Biden has done his first sit-down interview since he decided not to contest the election. He did it with CBS. This is what he had to say about Donald Trump if Trump loses the election. He's got a point, hasn't he? Has this interview been big news in Washington?
Yeah, so that's just an excerpt of the interview. It's broadcast in full on Sunday. As you say, Biden's first since he announced last month he was stepping down. Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate concern. That's about the peaceful transfer of power should Donald Trump lose. I mean, obviously, we're going to get a new president in January, come what may, but Kamala Harris is seen as a bit of an incumbent, really. He's worried, and he's only using Trump's own words. I mean, Trump has described there being a bloodbath when it comes to his political opponents should he come back into office. He's talked about being a dictator on day one should he win the election. And of course, you look back not too long ago to 2020, all the stats, all the votes added up, and the Electoral College showed us quite clearly that Joe Biden won the election. Donald Trump still doesn't accept the result of that ballot, still says it was a fix. And so I think it's a legitimate concern of Biden and many other people that, should the election in November be close, and the polls suggest it will be close, there's no guarantee that Donald Trump will accept the result. And then we saw what happened on January the 6th. We've seen the instability in the US since the last election. If Trump doesn't accept the result, says that the result's fixed and that the Democrats have won the election unfairly, I think there's a great deal of concern as to what might happen in that scenario.
Interestingly, I saw a tweet from Frank Luntz, the Republican, I was about to say Republican pollster, the pollster, who is often a guest on Times Radio and very articulate and interesting with it, saying if the election was held today, he would call it for Kamala Harris. She has made up an astonishing amount of ground, hasn't she?
She really has. I mean, to think that it's less than 3 weeks that Joe Biden said he was standing down. The momentum switched to her very, very quickly, and there was a lot of talk in the early days that she was too left wing. That some of her policies or some of the areas that she's been in charge of, policy areas she's been in charge of since coming into office, she's failed. To take the southern border as an example. Yet there seems to be a groundswell. I mean, in the swing states, the key swing states, she's made ground and closed the gap in places like Georgia and the Rust Belt states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. She's obviously enjoying a honeymoon too. She's out and she's on a 7-state tour at the moment, which will end on Saturday, began yesterday. So she's got lots of press, she's got lots of coverage with the appointment of Waltzs as her running mate and so on and so forth. She's certainly enjoying a honeymoon period. I think Frank is probably quite right. The polls do suggest that were the election to be held today, she'd probably win the popular vote. We've still got more than 90 days until polling day. An awful lot can happen.
And just very quickly, for my own interest, weirdly, has anyone interviewed the Pennsylvania governor? Because he was the hot favourite. Has anyone interviewed the also-rans for the vice presidential ticket?
Well, Josh Shapiro spoke at a rally in Philadelphia yesterday, where he put his wholehearted, full-throated endorsement behind Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for the ticket. I think he will be disappointed. I think there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who were very, very keen on Josh Shapiro. They see him as an energetic future leader. He's very close to Barack Obama. I think that in his more candid moments, he may be quite disappointed he's not got the job. She is accused of perhaps picking the safer option. Apparently, Tim Walz told her during the process that he has no ambition to be president. I don't think that can be the same can be said for Josh Shapiro. So he may well end up as a thorn in their side if it doesn't go too well, and I think we'll probably hear more of him as time goes by.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. That's Alistair Dawber, the Times and Sunday Times' Washington correspondent, bringing us up to date on the US presidential race.